I can't hear you.
I think we have everybody. Okay, it's now 1 o'clock, so I would like to call this meeting to order and welcome everybody today to the hearing. I can confirm not only do we have quorum, but we have full attendance today from every committee member. And with that, I would like to pass the chair to Vice Chair, Councillor Fitzgerald, to chair the remainder of the meeting today. And over to you, Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Chair Alcock. I would like to respectfully acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe under the terms of the Robinson-Huron Treaty number 61 of 1850 and the Williams Treaties of 1923. We commit to acknowledge, learn, educate, create opportunity, honor sacred places, and take actions towards real truth and reconciliation in support of our commitment to walking the path together in respect, peace, and harmony for future generations. And I have a motion moved by Councillor Armour and Councillor Stone, the planning agenda dated May 11th, 2022, be hereby adopted as printed and circulated. All in favor? Thank you, everyone. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? And I'm seeing none. All right. I'd like to welcome everyone to the public portion of the meeting to consider applications to amend zoning bylaw 2008-66P pursuant to section 34 of the Planning Act. The procedure of the public meeting will be as follows. A brief explanation of the purpose and effect of the application and any correspondence received to date will be given by staff. The applicant or the representative will be asked to provide any additional comments without repeating the information already outlined by staff. Any members of the public present will then be permitted to ask questions or provide comments respecting the applications. Committee will then have the opportunity to question the applicant, the planner, or anyone giving presentations. Once the public meeting is concluded, the input received, proposed amendments will be considered by committee and council. Any persons making representation are requested to first state their name and mailing address, and please note that presentations are limited to 10 minutes. Please be informed that an appellant must provide an oral submission at the public meeting or written submission prior to the passage of the zoning bylaw. Otherwise, the Ontario Land Tribunal may dismiss the appeal. If you wish to be notified of the passage of a zoning bylaw, you must file either with the recording secretary or with the clerk a written request for notification prior to the passage of the proposed zoning bylaw. Each notice of complete application and public meeting included an explanation of the purpose and effect of the proposed amendment, and notice was required to be posted at the subject lands. Notice was therefore considered to have been provided in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act and applicable sections of the Huntsville Official Plan. We will now deal with application number Z1022 HTE Cripps 123 Estonia Camp Road. And Kelsey.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just prepare my screen.
Thank you, Kelsey.
Great, I believe that's visible. Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, the subject property is located at 123 Estonian Camp Road. The lot is designated rural and is zoned rural 1. The applicant proposes to construct a single detached dwelling on the subject lands. The zoning amendment would change the zoning of the lands from rural 1 to rural 1 with exception to permit the construction of a single detached dwelling on a lot fronting on a seasonally maintained road. The official plan requires all new development in rural areas, with the exception of recreational uses such as hunt camps, to front and be accessible from a publicly maintained road, which is a condition appropriate for proposed use and can accommodate new development. Rural residential development should be encouraged to be located in areas where there is existing rural residential development fronting on municipally maintained roads, access is readily available to community facilities such as schools, and demand for public services such as fire, police, and home care can be optimized. Rural residential development should not be located in remote, undeveloped areas. These policies are intended to limit permanent rural residential development in areas where services are not readily available, and access to emergency services and healthcare can be provided. In this instance, the subject property is located 500 meters from the nearest point to a year-round municipally maintained road, being Clearwater Lake Road. The intent of the official plan is to meet the intent of the official plan, other landowners who have faced the same issue at their sole expense have upgraded the road to a municipal standard, and town has subsequently maintained the road or assumed maintenance, year-round maintenance. The applicant in this instance has not proposed to upgrade the road, nor the town has assumed maintenance. Looking at policies, Part B of the official plan, which speaks to environmental protections, steep slope areas were identified on the property. However, based on a site visit, development would not appear to be impacted by this natural constraint. So when looking at the provincial policy statement, rural lands policies encourage a broad mix of housing that are compatible with rural landscapes, and appropriate infrastructure is planned and available. And that appropriate road infrastructure is not available at this property. Therefore, this proposal is not consistent with the PPS. The application was circulated in accordance with the Planning Act. 4 letters of support were provided to a committee. The District of Muskoka provided comments, which were in the report package. The Operations Department has concerns and does not support the approval. They recommend that the road be upgraded to a municipal year-round standard for permanent residency. They also provided comment that there is no winter maintenance on this road and minimal summer maintenance. The Planning Department provided that due to the lack of access to the property, it shall be seasonal, or the building shall be sprinklered. The Fire Department also recommended that automatic sprinklers be installed in all residential structures, and they also, as noted in the report, had access and mitigation practices to be put into practice should it be developed. Through staff's reviews and analysis, the application would appear not to conform to the intent of the official plan or be consistent with the provincial policy statement, and therefore staff are recommending approval. Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Kelsey. I will call upon the applicant or the representative to provide any additional comments.
The applicant or the representative are reminded to use the raise hand button or press *9 to indicate that they would like to address committee. And Vice Chair Fitzgerald, I do see one hand raised. I will now bring them into the meeting.
Thank you.
Please note that during the transition, your video panel will be momentarily interrupted. Once you have been added to the meeting, your video will appear in the committee member panel. Please have your microphone and video, if possible, turned on before you begin speaking, and confirm your name and mailing address.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Nancy, are you chairing this meeting, or is Jason? Mr. Sorry about that. Actually, I have to apologize right away. My signal seems to be internet seems to be going in and out. So hopefully you can hear on the application. The app, Tony and Cheyenne Cripps are the owners of this property. It's a vacant property. It's about 20 acres in size. And right now, the only permitted use would be a hunt camp, and it's really not an appropriate location for that. Also, I believe Tony's sort of logged into the meeting, hopefully, and Sid Hassler is also logged in. Sid has an agreement of purchase and sale with Tony to buy the property so that he could build a residence on it for he and his family. They have a waterfront property elsewhere in the community that the area is getting increasingly busy, so they'd like to go to a spot where it's a little quieter and where there's and the site seems to be well suited to their requirements or their aspirations. Obviously, we're disappointed with the recommendation of denial, and I appreciate Kelsey's review of the application. If I could, and I didn't give my, hopefully, anyway, I would want to say that one of the statements that Kelsey referred to and made note of is to meet the intent of the official plan, other landowners who face the same issue have at their sole expense upgraded, and the town has subsequently assumed the road for year-round maintenance. And that's not what's proposed in this instance. I would just, I pointed this out to staff, but unfortunately, it was not mentioned in the report. But your council, this council approved an application identical to this on the north side in February 2020. The applicant at the time was Workington. And the intention of Mr. Workington was to sell the property to Kevin Coop, and Kevin and his wife have subsequently built a house on that lot. And you may recall at that time, Scott Aitchison, in his role as a realtor, spoke to the committee at that planning committee at that time. The staff recommendation at that time as well by Elizabeth Reimer was recommending denial, but council did approve it ultimately. And there are some good reasons that it is a bit of a community down there. It's albeit there's a strong sense of community. My clients have got letters of support from half a dozen people. Those letters are included in the staff report, Pioneer Camp and the Estonian as well. The road was originally constructed, I believe, by the Estonian Camp. It's maintained collectively by those neighbors, including the camp, and Kevin Coop in particular has been doing plowing at his driveway. The driveway that's proposed for Mr. Hassler's house is immediately opposite the driveway for Mr. Coop's house. So the intention was that, there would be some, it's already working for one family, it could very well work for another family, and probably collectively the community would appreciate having somebody else contributing to the cost of maintenance, of winter maintenance of the road. The road is in better shape than a lot of roads usually maintained, and it's very good in that respect. And so in terms of the official plan conformity, I think the important thing is to know that it's side whether or not they're satisfied with the access, if the access is appropriate. This council thought the access was appropriate for the property on the north side, and we situation. In terms of the district official plan, the report or letter from the district acknowledged that the determination of the appropriateness of the access is really left to the municipality, the area municipality. The district really doesn't have any say in that. For the access, that's really the fundamental issue. In every other The provincial policy statement, Kelsey's opinion that what approving the plan would be inappropriate because it wouldn't be consistent with the PPS. And she cited a section that says encourages a broad mix of housing that is compatible with the rural landscape, which I believe this is, and appropriate to the infrastructure which is planned or available. And she went on to say that the appropriate road infrastructure is not available for the subject property. And in her opinion, the proposal is not consistent with the PPS. I fundamentally disagree with that. Firstly, we know the province is a very large geographic area, and I can have every confidence that the province is not going to be particularly concerned about somebody building a rural residence on a roadway that's municipally owned but maintained to some seasonally as opposed to year round. The access is quite appropriate. And so I don't think I don't think the nature of this application brings into question its consistency with the PPS. If we want to look at the consistency of the PPS, we can also note that limited residential development is permitted on rural lands, and this is the case here. So I disagree with Kelsey's determination that the application is inconsistent with PPS. I think for all intents and purposes, the PPS is rather neutral or not all that much of a determinant. I think what I really want to emphasize is that the road is passable. It's quite usable. Other people are using it. It's maintained privately by people in the area. Again, the Coop family were able to build a house, a similar dwelling on the opposite side of the road in a driveway location. It's immediately opposite what's proposed. The property is 20 acres. It's not the type of property that can be developed for much else. Nobody would expect anybody to cut down the trees and have a horse farm or riding stables, or it's too small to have a hunt camp. And so I think it's really a matter of putting it to some reasonable economic use. And again, the lands are surplus to Mr. and Mrs. Cripps, who reside and have a large property right in Port Sydney as well. So we would hope that the council would see fit to approve this application in the same manner it approved the application on the opposite side of the road, application Z02-2020 for under the name of Workington, and we would not expect any extraordinary requirements associated with that, but we're at the mercy of the committee in town if you deem that approval necessitates something more. But I think that should not be the case. But anyway, I do appreciate the opportunity to speak to you. And if you have any questions you want to direct to the property owner or to the prospective purchaser, Mr. Hassler, I believe they're online and may be available to answer any questions that I can't. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wayne. Appreciate that. At this time, I'd like to ask if there are any members of the public who would like to address the committee on this application.
Members of the public are reminded to use the raise hand button or press *9 to indicate that they would like to address committee. And Vice Chair Fitzgerald, I see no hands raised.
Thank you. All right, committee. Any questions? I'll go to Chair Alcock. Isn't that funny? I'll go to Deputy Mayor Alcock.
Thank you, Chair Fitzgerald. A quick question to either Kelsey or Kirsten. With the previous application that was approved, the COOP application, I'm assuming we wrote in some sort of legal agreement that removed all responsibility from the municipality to maintain the road. So is that how we did that? I can't remember.
We subjected the property to site plan control so that there was wording in the agreement that would reflect that the town was not responsible for any winter maintenance on the road.
Thank you for that. And if I may, Chair Fitzgerald, just a quick follow-up. So, and
Absolutely.
and in doing that through the site plan agreement, then does that, if for any reason the applicant decided to sell their property, does that continue with the new owner? It does.
Yes.
Thank you. That's what I wanted to know. Thanks very much.
Councillor Stone.
Thank you. In planning applications, we don't look at precedents, but it is interesting to note, and I'm glad that it was brought up. But in this instance, I see no reason not to let them build here just because we don't have winter maintenance. They're doing it on their own. We do have a minimum maintenance for summer travel on the road. And we have a lot of these properties, and we need to say, okay, if you've got a large property and there's reasonable access to it, as long as you understand we're not providing any municipal services, then welcome to town.
Thank you for your comments, Councillor Stone. Councillor Armour.
Thank you, Chair Fitzgerald. Just a quick question. I agree with what's said so far, and I'm curious, with all these new applications coming through that are on unmaintained or seasonal roads, this might go to Christian actually. Can we do a zone that would, like an RU1 unmaintained road zoning for these places, that they don't have to create a zone that we can actually use for something like this?
Through you, Vice Chair Fitzgerald, we would have to ultimately review the official plan and go up to the community to determine whether or not an official plan amendment would be appropriate that would permit this additional form of rural development. You may recall when we were reviewing the official plan that started in 2016 and was ultimately finished in 2019, we had quite numerous discussions. They were quite vigorous with the official plan working group as well about what form of rural development is appropriate and what we should permit as of right and what would need more review and evaluation. And ultimately it was determined that year-round maintained roads was appropriate. Recreational uses that weren't year-round dwellings could be on the lands that weren't year-round maintained, fronting on year-round maintained roads or on seasonal roads or that had no road access. But then the provision that the sort of trade or balance with that was that we also determined that it would be appropriate to allow rural estate subdivision development. And that was the consideration that was provided for lands that didn't necessarily front on year-round maintained roads. There was an alternate form of development available, but it's more than just one lot would be considered under those sorts of terms. So.
Thank you, Director Maxwell. Mayor Truziano, I believe you were next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I think I've said it before. Fundamentally, I disagree with continually going against our official plan, especially on the non-maintained roads. I understand exactly what Councillor Stone said, that there's probably really no reason not to allow somebody to build there, but I think the route we have to take is to change our official plan and deal with it once and for all, because honestly, I'm tired of the same application coming forward, staff recommending denial based on what our official plan says, and us overturning them and approving them all. I think something has to be done. I don't know whether there's anything we can do to address this one type of issue in our CPP. I know that's not our official plan, but maybe there's something that we can do within it. But this is ridiculous. Either we're going to allow them and we're going to have rules such as sprinkling and signed off legal agreements and things, or we're not. But I just don't think we should be doing this every meeting. Right now, I'm not going to support it. I think we need to force the change as opposed to just approving them.
Thank you for your comments. Councillor Weeb.
Thank you, Chair Fitzgerald. So I think it's obvious that the bulk committee feels that we should support this, and I tend to agree. I think that sprinkling is a given, should be a given, and I really think that what's happening here is we are starting to hone in on what some of the absolute necessities should be if we go down the road of having a new designation. It's becoming very clear that putting things on title that we're not responsible. Sprinkling is obviously another one. And I think another question would be to Kirsten, maybe even to the building department, given that it's in this type of location, would the building department still require the builder to meet the standards of a year-round home versus a seasonal dwelling? Because I know seasonal dwellings, cottages, don't require the same level of insulation, et cetera. So if we go down this road, even though it's on a seasonal road or right, do we still have to, will the building department still require the permit to be a fully year-round dwelling?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Weeb. I'm not sure we have anyone qualified to answer attending this meeting. I certainly don't have an answer for you.
Okay.
Vice Chair Fitzgerald, if I could, I would suggest that, from what I understand with the building, the issuance of building permits, is that if it's not on a year-round maintained road, the owner has to acknowledge whether or not it's a year-round home or not, and then they follow the building code requirements from there. So
it goes
we
out.
can follow up and confirm with the chief building official. So.
Okay. So that kind of, I guess that clears it up. So that's good. So anyway, to sum up, I'm in favor if we put in some of these restrictions.
Thank you, Councillor Weeb, and thank you, Director Maxwell. I didn't mean to sell you short, but we will confirm that with the building department. All right. Any further comments or questions, Councillor Armour?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to put a motion on that we change this from denial to approval.
Okay. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Stone, you want to second that?
I would, please.
Okay. Thank you. Deputy Mayor Alcock, I saw you raise your hand there. Did you have something to add, or? Okay. Thank you. Councillor Armour, you have further comment?
Yes, I'd like to see that change to approval, but with restrictions of adding a sprinkler system, et cetera, to the household, so it meets those requirements.
Okay, thank you. Director Maxwell, do you have anything, any comments you want to make regarding Councillor Armour's request?
Sorry, Vice Chair Fitzgerald, just to confirm that it would follow the same sort of format that we did previously, where we require it to be subject to site plan control, thereby including wording that recognizes the town's limitations on maintenance. And yes, we can do that. Yeah, I believe Julie has got a motion crafted that would address that.
Perfect, thank you.
The original motion, and then we'll follow with the
Okay, can you put the original motion up on the screen, Julie? Thank you. So I have to change. This is moved by Councillor Armour. Oh, sorry. Moved by Councillor Weeb and Councillor Armour, is recommended that the Planning Committee recommend denial of zoning bylaw amendment Z1022 HTE for the purpose and effect of which is to change the zoning from a rural 1 RU1 zone to a rural 1 with exception XXXX RU1 XXXX zone to permit a single detached dwelling on rural lands with no frontage on a year-round maintained municipal road. Okay, I have an amended motion. It was moved by Councillor Armour and seconded by Councillor Stone. It is recommended that Planning Committee recommend approval of zoning bylaw amendment Z1022 HT for the purpose and effect of which is to change the zoning from a rural 1 RU1 zone to a rural 1 with exception XXXX RU1-XXXX zone to permit a single detached dwelling on rural lands with no frontage on a year-round maintained municipal road, and site plan control shall be imposed to acknowledge access will be on a non-year-round maintained road and no municipal service will be available, and further the dwelling must be fully sprinklered. Councillor Weeb, you have a comment?
Thank you, Chair. Still really quick. So would this apply? I just realized that that's quite a large parcel. Should the applicant or should the new owner wish to subdivide, would this zoning apply to the new parcel or would it be a whole new process?
Director Maxwell, do you want to address that?
Thank you, Vice Chair Fitzgerald. I can. It would ultimately. We unfortunately, yeah, I'd have to look at the policies, or maybe Kelsey can help, but I don't believe that we would want to approve another lot in that location because the amount of frontage and area required may not meet the official plan requirements regardless. But I don't know if that would be an issue or not.
If I may, yes, it would still have to conform to the 134 meters of frontage on a maintained road. I believe that would still be applicable. So.
All right. No further comments or questions. We'll call the question. All in favor of the amended motion? And that's carried. Thank you.
So we have to do the event. So you just have to call the question now on the main motion as amended. So this one will vote. Yes. We won't reread it.
I'm getting further instruction from Julie, and I have to call the question on the main motion as amended. All in favor? And that's carried.
I think you're muted there, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Armour. This is the end of the public meeting. So now that the comments have been received, I declare these public meetings respecting the above applications to be concluded. We'll now move to the non-public portion of the meeting. If the applicant or their agent wishes to make comments regarding their application, please raise your hand after the staff presentation. All right, so we're moving to reports from municipal officers and SPA 136-2021 HTE and C 2022-2 2609466 Ontario Inc. 46 Haynes Road and 18 Legacy Lane. Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So through you, I'm just going to share my screen. And I'm told you can see that now. So the subject properties are located at 46 Haynes Road and 18 Legacy Lane. The lots are designated urban residential and zoned residential 3 with exception 249, residential 3 holding with exception 489, and residential 4 holding with exception 490. As committee may recall, 46 Haynes Road was acquired by the applicant to facilitate development on 18 Legacy Lane. Committee may also recall that the lands at 18 Legacy Lane were the subject of a recent zoning bylaw amendment application and a site plan application, both to support a 33-unit bungalow townhouse development, which is now well under construction. Subsequently, the lands at 46 Haynes Road were the subject of another zoning bylaw amendment to permit 2 multiple residential buildings with a combined total of 80 units and to permit 38 townhouses. A holding provision was added to the lands at that time, at the time of approval of that application, to ensure development would not proceed until adequate provisions for infrastructure and services were secured and peer reviews of technical reports were completed. The approved townhouse development at 18 Legacy Lane was to be the initial phase and phase 1 of a larger phase condominium development involving the subject lands, which the owner referred to as the High Crest Muskoka development. Whereas the units approved through the rezoning on 46 Haynes Road were to be phases 2 to 5 of that development. At full build out, the total number of dwelling units as part of the High Crest Muskoka development is now proposed to be 150 units, including the 33 bungalow townhouses on 18 Legacy Lane, and on 46 Haynes Road, 37 new townhouse units and 80 new apartment units. The phase condominium description application C2 2022-2 has been submitted and to the district for approval to establish the High Crest Muskoka phase condominium development. The site plan application that's also referred to in this report has been submitted to permit 15 more bungalow townhouse units as part of phase 2 of the Muskoka High Crest, or sorry, the High Crest Muskoka development. So here is the an image of the draft phased condominium description plan. And you can see that there are 6 phases in total. So once again, this application proposes 150 units within 6 phases, and those would be registered sequentially as shown on this plan. So phase 1, or sorry, the initial phase is shown in yellow, and it was to be 24 townhouse units, as well as construction of 2 of the streets. Phase 1 was 9 more townhouse units. And those previous 2 phases, the initial phase and phase 1, as I said, were approved through site plan application already. The current site plan application is for phase 2, and it proposes 15 townhouse units, as well as construction of a little portion of Street C to service a few of the townhouse units along it. Phase 3 would be 3 more townhouse units and 1 of the 2 multi-residential buildings. And this one would be a 48-unit building. Phase 4 would be the second of the 2 multi-residential buildings, and this one would have 32 units. And the 5th and final phase would include 19 townhouse units. As can be seen on the plans, the bungalow townhouses that are the bungalow townhouses are distributed around the outer perimeter of the proposed development to achieve an appropriate transition to the neighboring, the surrounding neighborhoods. And then the higher density 3-story apartment style buildings are focused in the center of development. The sketch also shows visual screening buffers between the townhouse units and the surrounding open space blocks. The lands have been zoned to permit the development, as was previously noted. Standard conditions of approval have been recommended to ensure condominium phases will not be registered until it's appropriate to do so. Also, the holding provisions added to the lands at 46 Haynes are also recommended for inclusion in the conditions. And those conditions were attached as attachment number 1 to the staff report. So more on the phase 2 site plan. The site plan application, as I've said, proposes 15 additional bungalow townhouse units along Street C. The proposed development is within the R3H exception 0489 zone, which was applied through a recent zoning bylaw application. And the proposed development complies with that zoning. Some minor changes may still be required to address outstanding engineer matters and peer reviews. One thing just to bring to committee's attention is the green areas that are shown on this site plan. Those are the areas that correspond to areas that were supposed to be a 4-meter wide tree buffer. Landscape plans will require minor revisions to address requirements for that 4-meter wide tree buffer to the rear of the townhouses. This will require addition of additional trees in those areas and expansion of those planting areas. It should be noted that off-site works are proposed in relation to this development, including off-site landscaping between High Crest Muskoka development, the proposed High Crest Muskoka development, and Serenity Place condominium to the east, and a pedestrian path between this site and Center Street, occupying the north side of Haynes Road. Incidentally, it should be noted that there are intersection improvements that are to be implemented at Haynes and Center. These are some of the renderings that you may remember from the past rezoning, showing what the bungalow townhouses would look like. These are some of the site photos. And these were taken back last summer. This photo here shows where the multi-residential building would be. And these are the photos showing the west side of the development where the 15 townhouse units will be. Just a few shots of the frontage along Haynes Road, and the sidewalk or pedestrian path that we were talking about would be extended all the way from this site towards Center Street. Environmental impact studies and stormwater management studies were submitted in support of the application. A peer review of the environmental impact study was requested by the district and was conducted. A final response to the peer review comments has been prepared by the applicant's environmental consultant and is now under review by the district's peer reviewer. Once complete, the recommendations of this report and any additional requirements from the peer review emerging from the peer review must be implemented through the site plan agreement. A peer review of the stormwater management study was also conducted and all comments were addressed. Further details are now being provided by the applicant's engineer in response to follow-up comments from the town's Operation and Protected Services Department respecting the detailed stormwater management and mitigation plans. A traffic impact brief was conducted and submitted in support of the rezoning, and it has been peer reviewed. And an addendum was submitted in response to those peer review comments. As I noted earlier, in consideration of the town's master sidewalk plan, In consultation with the applicant at the rezoning stage, it was requested that installation of a pedestrian path between this site and Center Street be provided. The engineering submission does include that path. The applications appear to conform with the official plan and be consistent with the provincial policy statement, and staff are recommending approval subject to conditions to address outstanding matters noted in the report. Thank you for listening, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Richard. I would now ask the applicant or the representative if they wanted to provide any additional comments.
The applicant or their representative are reminded to use the raise hand button or press *9 to indicate that they would like to address committee. And Vice Chair Fitzgerald, I do see one hand raised, and I'll now bring them into the meeting. A reminder to please have your microphone and video, if possible, turned on before you begin speaking, and to confirm your name and mailing address.
Good afternoon.
Welcome back.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Wayne Simpson and Associates, 3-76 King William Street, Huntsville, P1H1E4. I didn't do that the last time. I apologize. But yes, as agent for Mr. Goodfellow's company, I just want to say, first off, we're really appreciative of the staff report and its comprehensiveness and being able to deal with both the site plan approval and comments to the district on the condominium plan that's we're soon looking to get approved by the district. I would only comment one little comment that it's fundamentally I agree with the conditions that are recommended by Richard. I think I would just like to speak with Richard and Curtis about some of the language and how it might be touched up a bit, but really the essence of it all is there. I think there's just a few instances where we might have to change the language just in terms of the timelines and what comes first and what's the condition precedent and what's not and that sort of thing. So anyway, all of that to say we're very appreciative, and I'm not sure if Dave Goodfellow's watching as well, but I'm available if the committee has any questions. Thank you very much.
Committee, Councillor Stone, you have some comments or questions?
I do, and if Mr. Simpson might come back and answer, at the last time this was before us, I had great concern with some others as well that with all 150 units and there's no amenity space, and you said you were going to consider that. Can you tell us where that is going to be?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Oh, no, you're not Mr. Chair. He's the other. Okay. So anyway, appreciate that again. So actually, we're going to be having a pre-consultation meeting with staff on Friday morning of this week to talk about sort of the mid-rise component of the project. We're also going to be talking about, we want to raise the issue of the parking requirements for the mid-rise component. We think a parking standard of 1.25 as opposed to 1.5 would be able to allow us to create more green space on the property, which would be one of the things. As you may recall, that there's some discussion initially that there would be a rooftop common element amenity space for all the residents in the project as well on top of one of the mid-rise buildings. So it's certainly something that we're acutely aware of in terms of the municipality's interests, and we've taken it under advisement, and we'll continue to work with staff through the design. The next phase, the current phase that's being subject to site plan approval is again a dozen townhomes or whatever the number might be, but the next phase will get us into the mid-rise buildings, and so at that time we will definitely be having to have more discussion about what sort of amenity space can be incorporated into the plan.
Just as a follow-up?
Certainly.
Then through you to Richard. So what we're approving today, can you confirm that will not restrict us in demanding, if necessary, an amenity space in the next phase or whatever's coming next, as was mentioned.
Richard?
Yes, thank you. Good question. So through you, Mr. Chair. So I think it's something I think that you probably want to get some clarity on from Wayne and the applicant. I think what we need to know is, are you talking about the same thing in terms of amenity space? Are you talking about outdoor amenity space at the ground level? Or I know I've discussed with this applicant that there might be rooftop amenity space. So I think that might be something that you just might want to get clarification on, so you're speaking the same language. And then if it is ground floor amenity space, then you might want to, I think, put a condition about amending this draft plan to accommodate that additional space, is what I would suggest.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Stone. Thank you, Richard. Deputy Mayor Alcock.
Thank you, Chair Fitzgerald. I'm so happy to be following Councillor Stone because I had exactly the same question. And, you know, when you see, I don't have anything against the site plan as it is, but I was, and I'm very appreciative of the pedestrian path. That's really great from a connectivity perspective. But really my comment is not just directed to the applicant in this case, but it's also to our own planning department. I think, you know, as we continue to intensify and add this density in our urban settlement areas, we have to be thinking about what kind of parks we're providing, especially if we have 80 apartment units. And I know we had the discussion about the amenity space within the condo itself, but I think, you know, I'm currently out in Vancouver, and it reinforces spades, where even in old and new neighborhoods, the provision of significant parkland is really critical if we're increasing densities in our urban areas. And so when I looked at this, I thought, from my perspective, I'm echoing exactly what Councillor Stone raised, and I would actually be happy to add a condition with respect to the inclusion of some sort of suitable outdoor amenity area, not just contained within the multi-use building or multiples. Because I think it's absolutely critical. People have a place that they can go outside. If COVID taught us one thing, is that we need our outdoor spaces. So, and I put that both to the applicant, but equally to our own planning, that I think this is becoming really significant as we continue to approve higher density developments. And so from my perspective, I would like to propose that we add a condition that, you know, we have the discussions that Wayne referred to about what this amenity looks like, but we're very specific that it's suitable outdoor amenity area, and it's to the satisfaction of the town. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Alcock. Wayne, I see your hand. I'm just going to continue with Councillor Weeb, and then we'll get to you, okay?
Thank you.
Councillor Weeb.
Thanks, Chair Fitzgerald. I couldn't have said it better, actually, but I will say more. I'll say that, you know, sort of doing the minimum or doing what's technically permitted, I don't think it just isn't good enough anymore. So I'm not willing to support anything without a condition that says there has to be an increase in public park space, because we're going to look back in 20, 30 years and think, wow, another lost opportunity. So without a doubt, I think we need to do better there. And I'll be voting in favor once I see that.
Thank you, Councillor Weeb. Wayne, you would like to respond to some of those queries?
Yeah, yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. one of the recommendations in the appendix 1 to the staff report are the recommended conditions of draft plan approval. And condition number 3 is a standard condition that's attached to pretty well every draft plan and subdivision or condominium. And that it requires that the owner convey lands to the municipality in an amount of 5% of the area of the lands included for recreational park or recreational purposes pursuant to section 51(1) of the Planning Act, or alternatively, the municipality can require cash in lieu. I would point out that the cash in lieu option is only there if the council offers it up. Okay, so the developer doesn't have the right to choose a cash in lieu option. So right now you have a condition proposed that 5% of the lands within the whole of the development, Legacy Lane, 46 Haines, the full extent of the condominium application, all those phases, all the units, there's a requirement of conveyance of 5% parkland to the satisfaction of the town. And so that's where typically the condition is given that way as a broad thing. Is what's the Planning Act sort of sets out as under the legislative authority. That's the maximum the municipality can ask for or demand, as it were. But then it's usually subject to some discussions between the parties to see, what can be incorporated where, for what purpose, what's public, what's private, how does it function, and those sorts of things. So I would hope that there would be no need to amend anything right now, because you do have a sort of an all-encompassing, very broad condition that will be imposed by the district, and it's all going to be to the satisfaction of the town. It's not the district that makes calls on the parkland as much as they impose the condition, make sure the condition is satisfied to the met to the satisfaction of the town. And so I think the municipality is well covered with what's proposed in Richard's report already. Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne. Deputy Mayor Alcock, I just want to go to Richard and ask him to respond to Wayne's comments in regards to the parkland, and are we confident that all final plans and drawings being to satisfaction in the town and all other commenting agencies is enough to cover that, what the committee members are asking for?
Yes. So I guess the one distinction is the parkland dedication requirement. So it would be 5% on a property like this. Our operations department wouldn't typically want to have a public park that's accessed by a private road into a condominium development. So it wouldn't be suitable in this instance for us to actually get a public park internal to this private development. So I would think if what this committee's after is to have some suitable open space set aside for the eventual occupants of this community, that they should be looking at making sure that the developer sets aside an amenity area in his private development for those future residents. So I think it's a little bit different. And I would just note that in this instance, as I said before, our operations department did not ask for a parkland dedication. If it was a subdivision and there were subdivision roads to get to the park, then it might be different. But because it's a private development, it just raises too many operational concerns.
Thank you, Richard. Deputy Mayor Alcock.
Thank you, Chair Fitzgerald, and to Richard for your comments. I do want to respond to Wayne, if I could, and that is, I hear what he's saying with respect to statutory requirements, but I think in this case, it's really important that we add this condition, and that it is to the satisfaction of the town, as Wayne said, but that we're also specifically referencing suitable outdoor amenity space, because it's very clear, and it was clear in the last time we were discussing this during the zoning amendment process, that this is a really important issue. And I think to the points that I raised earlier, it's becoming more important as we start approving these higher density areas. And I think it's critical that that committee give the planners, our planners who are working on this file, the direction to say, this is really critical to us. And it's not, you know, we're not going to rely on, you know, whatever might be discussed or might, you know, whatever. That's certainly not cash in lieu. This is something else. This is, we want this particular amenity area. So that's my thinking. That's what I'd like. And that's why I think having this additional amendment or this additional condition, it's not to impose something on the applicant that is impossible to do. It's just to provide clear guidance on what's important to this committee.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Alcock. Mayor Terziano.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I agree with the amenity space, but I think that we need to be more specific. I mean, we can walk away and a 2x3 patch of grass with a swing set can be considered amenity space. So I think if we're actually insisting at this stage on an amenity space, we better be more specific as to size and the type of amenities you're talking about. I don't know if the people who are feeling really passionate about this are talking about green space or play space or, you know, a paved parking lot, but I think we have to be more specific if we're going to do it.
Thank you for that. Deputy Mayor Alcock.
Thank you, Chair Fitzgerald. I absolutely agree with her worship. I think that we do need to be specific. We will be up against, again, to Wayne's point, what they're required to do. And if it's my preference, what it really twigged with me when I saw the 80 units, which we had approved earlier. This is not a change in that direction. It's just that, you know, 80 units, and we have approved previous developments where we've done that, and we've not given enough. I don't think we've given enough attention, paid enough attention to what green space is available to those new residents. And so I'm looking at specifically green space, and preferably a place, you know, I joked actually, because I had corresponded with Richard about this earlier, and I was thinking, you know, I'm not suggesting there are going to be kids flying kites, but, you know, where do people go if they just want to hang out in the park? And, you know, 5% is probably not a huge allocation. And I absolutely hear what her worship's talking about. What's a little postage stamp? I think what my view would be, we are trying to negotiate the best possible green space. And maybe it's you know, in addition to the walkway that's already been dedicated, the pedestrian walkway, that's green. Maybe there's some way we can add to that. I don't know. I'd look to the creativity of our planners to figure it out. But from my perspective, it's green space where people who are living in the condo units, the multi unit building, have a place to go outside and hang out, sit, appreciate the birds, all of that stuff. So that's my direction. I can't be more explicit than that.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Alcock. Councillor Armour.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It sounds like this is a bigger issue than we're going to be able to solve here today. I'm just wondering if after the meeting on Friday that maybe we should be deferring this and have them come back to the next meeting with opportunities to create green space and show us what they plan ahead, because I don't think we're going to fix it right here, right now.
Thank you for that, Councillor Armour. Wayne, I'll give you a chance to comment.
Yeah, I appreciate the comments, and I know my client, you know, shares the same sort of aspirations for the community, and that's one of the reasons I mentioned that we're looking to maybe reducing the parking standard so we don't end up with, 0.25 times or whatever, and being more paved space, more hot space, more stormwater space and stuff like that. So, it's widely accepted. I'm sure that what you're asking for and what you're expecting is quite reasonable. My only concern would be that if we're talking right now, we're talking about any amendments. The site plan agreement that's before the council today is just for that dozen or so townhouses along the westerly property line, and it's important that we get site plan approval on that quickly because Dave needs that to be able to break ground and to keep things moving for the purchasers of those homes. So and it's important that he has the site plan approval so he can continue with his. It's not carry on anymore, but carry on registration on that component of the development. So. There's a lot of sense of urgency in getting the site plan agreement in place. In terms of the district's conditions of draft plan approval, there's also a sense of urgency because we need to register the initial phase, and it's ready for occupancy and everything else, and we don't want to delay that. So, but could I ask that maybe the committee not make any amendments to what's in front of you today? But that leave it to David and myself to meet with staff on Friday to talk a little bit more about it, to see what answers or solutions we can come back with. I know we're all thinking the same. We're all thinking about the same thing, and I think there's a good element of trust and workmanship between everybody. So I would hope that we could do that, and because all we're asking today is for council to comment to the district so that they can impose the conditions of approval on the condo, the whole thing, and so the first phase can get registered, and also for the site plan, just for those 12 units. We're not talking about site plan approval for the mid-rise buildings, the next 3 phases at all at this time. Thank you.
All right, with that, Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chair Fitzgerald. So that sounds okay to me. I mean, I do have a problem with the fact that we talked about this 8 months ago about us wanting more green space. So in effect, this leaves it down to the last week to show an enhancement of the green space. So we're hoping to boost up some of the green space in that development, and I think there's going to be disappointment around the table for everyone, including your client, if this comes to council in 2 weeks and it's there's not much improvement. So I'll stick with what I said earlier, and that is that I'm not going to vote in favor until I see some improvements on it. So I guess it's a bit of a gamble on your part, but I'm okay with going forward today. But the ratification at council might be a little bit harder if there aren't some really nice improvements there. So we'll try for it.
Thank you for those comments, Council. Thank you, Councillor Reid. Director Maxwell, you have a comment or question or?
Thank you, Vice Chair Fitzgerald. I do. Based on all the comments we've heard today, staff 100% have heard everything that's been mentioned. I am wondering if, in order to also enable Mr. Goodfellow to move forward with the registration of the condominium, if we limit the approval and just reference phase 1 and phase 2, so that the condominium phase 1 and phase 2, and then the site plan for these existing or the next 12 townhouses, I think it would be able to move ahead, but the rest of the development would still be subject to more discussion and could be discussed on Friday as well with the green space and what could be done to address committee's concerns. If you're amenable to that, we could work on that.
Thank you, Director Maxwell. Deputy Mayor Alcock.
Thank you, Chair Fitzgerald. Yes, I just wanted to say I'm amenable to that. I hear what the applicant's saying. If we can move forward and the critical, the first piece due to timing, that sounds good. And then the other, we will have some assurance that there'll be work on that. I'm not saying it as well as Kirsten just did. So I support what Kirsten just said. How's that?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Alcock. I guess at this juncture, we would need a motion to amend. So we need a firster and a seconder to basically edit the wording to include just phase 1 and 2 to move forward. I see one hand raised, Chair Alcock. You'd be the firster, and Councillor Stone would be seconder. And good news, we don't have anything prepared for this, so we're going to take a 5-minute break. Only 5. Thank you, everyone. We are still working on the wording for the amendment, so please be patient.
So we can deal with. As it is, and then I'll show you. And you'll have to vote on the amendment and then the main motion as amended. We can just do it separate.
So we have some wording completed. We're going to deal with the condominium description application first. So I have moved by Councillor Stone, seconded by Councillor Armour. Be resolved that Planning Committee recommend to the District of Muskoka that phased condominium description application C 2022-02 be approved, conditional on the conditions of approval as listed in attachment 1 to this report, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to sign any necessary documentation related to phased condominium description application C 2022-02.
Now I'll just scroll and show you the changes of what will be happening. You don't need to remove it.
And Julie has shared her screens. And we see the changes in red. Okay, any further comments or questions? I will call a question on the main motion. All in favor? That is carried.
Hang on a second. Can we?
Councillor Stone?
So we were voting on the amended motion.
Amended.
Thank you.
And that carried.
Yeah, so then you have to call the question on the main motion now as it's amended.
Yeah. Main motion now as amended. All in favor? And that carries. Thank you. We now have the site plan. Moved by Councillor Stone, seconded by Councillor Armour. Be it resolved, the Director of Development Services approves site plan application SPA 136-2021 HTE, and the agreement prepared to the satisfaction of the town. Further, the mayor and clerk are hereby authorized to sign any necessary documentation, conditional on all final plans and drawings being to the satisfaction of the town and all their commenting agencies. Councillor Stone, you have a question?
I do. So I just want to go to Richard if we can and confirm that this doesn't hamstring us at all.
I think that would be a great idea. Richard crafted this, so I believe we get our park green space that we want.
Yeah.
Richard.
Great question. And I would say no, this doesn't. Phase 2 is not part of the area where they would be looking at the potential outdoor open space.
Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Any further comments? None. I'll call the question. All in favor? And that carries. Thank you. We are moving along to general information. I believe Richard has a community planning permit verbal update for us. Richard.
Sure, yes. Very briefly, so we had public meetings on the second draft of the community planning permit bylaw in April. And we also had 2 open houses, one virtual, one in person. And I should say the public meeting was also an in-person public meeting over in the Algonquin Theatre. Based on the written comments that we've received on the second draft and the verbal comments that we heard at the public meeting, we're now working with our consultant to prepare a final draft that will address all of the comments that we've heard. And the goal would be to bring that to our June planning committee meeting so that we can identify all the comments that were heard and how we've addressed them in the final draft. And then if that's, if committee is favorable, we would take that to council at the end of the June for final approval of the bylaw. And I don't know if there's anything else, Kristen, we should add at this point, but I think that's the general plan of where we're at and what we're planning to do next.
Thank you, Richard. Questions or comments? I see Mayor Triziano.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to note that as much as it was a long meeting for the public meeting, we just really kept hearing the same things over and over. And I've got to say, I'm less than impressed that our consultants couldn't have put that together in time for this meeting. That was not that many changes. They are consultants. They should be working for us and they should have had it done by this meeting. So I'm quite disappointed, and not with staff, with the consultants.
Thank you for those comments, Mayor Triziano. Councillor Weeb.
Thank you, Chair Fitzgerald. I was just going to highlight how I thought that our staff really handled the meeting well, and we're kind of hit with the random sort of pick a comment out of the hat, and Richard, you handled it very well. So I thought that was great. I think that we've also, I think the staff have anticipated those comments and have reacted very well and appropriately. So I think we're on the right track. I think we're very close. So one way or another, I think we're going to get a good result out of this. So thanks.
Thanks for that, Councillor Weeb. Deputy Mayor Alcock.
Thank you, Chair Fitzgerald. I just wanted to echo Councillor Weeb's comments. I thought that Richard handled it was an excellent job, and you handled all of the questions beautifully. So I echo those comments.
Good work, Richard, is what I'm hearing. So
thank you.
All the planning, I know it hasn't been a simple endeavor, and don't seem to get a lot of public uptake on it other than people that seem to be immediately affected. So I look forward to seeing the changes from the consultants and moving this forward.
Great, thank you very much.
If there's no further questions or comments, I have a motion to adjourn. Moved by Mayor Triziano and Councillor Weeb. It is recommended we hereby adjourn at 2:25. All in favor? Everyone's in favor, unanimous. Thank you, everyone, for your patience and your comments. We'll see you soon.